secretly cheating on your wife with her lover." Like many other writers, George Anderson's short story, February Sucks, hit a nerve with me. It's a great story that evokes emotion in the reader. But I've always been uncomfortable with the assumption that a formerly loving wife would spontaneously ruin her life just because a hot celebrity approached her. I even find it hard to believe that a previously loving husband would do such a thing, and most guys would have sex with girls if they weren't afraid of splinters. I just couldn't picture Linda running off with a guy she'd just met. And so, after resisting the urge to add to this myth, the need for an explanation finally broke my resistance. So, without further ado, here's my brief explanation of what led up to that fateful night. "Hi, I'm Mark. Would you like to dance?" He stood behind Linda's left shoulder and held out his hand to her. Desire overwhelmed her, and she took his hand automatically and let him lead her out onto the dance floor. She melted into his embrace, savoring the feeling of power and sexuality that emanated from his body. She felt his hard presence. They'd met at the coffee shop when, while talking to Dee on the phone, she was picking up her order for the office, and without looking, she'd turned around too quickly. All 4 hot forecourts fell down, wetting the man who was admittedly standing too close behind her. He shrieked as the hot coffee soaked his shirt. Linda rushed for tissues and began trying to wipe the coffee off. The man tried to pull off his shirt, and Linda pressed the wipes against him, involuntarily pressing the hot clothes against his skin. As she did so, it became clear to her that the body under the shirt felt as hard as stone. She was so used to the softness of Jim's body that she continued to press the tissues against his body, even after the man told her it was okay. Finally, he took her wrists and gently guided her hands away from his body. Suddenly realizing what she was doing, Linda blushed. She stammered an apology, but the man insisted it was all his fault for standing too close to her. He beckoned to the barista to refill her order and put it on his tab, despite Linda's objections. "Well," she said, "at least let me pay for the dry cleaning of your clothes." She raised her head and looked him in the face. That look made her feel young and foolish, even childish. Very different from Jim, with whom she was almost the same height. "God, that man looks like a god!" She felt a rush of desire. "Let me think about it." He smiled at the beautiful woman. "Why don't we sit down while they take your order, and you can give me your phone number?" Thus began her affair with Mark Lavaliere. They arranged to meet for lunch, ostensibly so she could pay for his dry cleaning, which she never did. But both knew it was really a date. By the 3rd lunch, they were kissing on meeting and parting, and Linda's kisses became more and more passionate and promising. For the 5th lunch, Mark invited her to his home where he prepared lunch. The lunch he had prepared was left uneaten. He took her, but she actually gave herself to him. She worshipped at his altar. For the next few weeks, they met 2 or even 3 times a week and had sex with each other. She ceded control to Mark. Linda became his playground, and she enjoyed it. Unlike Jim, who lovingly accepted Linda's control over their sex life, when and if they had sex, what activities were acceptable or not, Mark simply made love to her any way he wanted, any time he wanted, as his right. She might have been Jim's wife, but she was Mark's woman. Mark was the god she had envisioned. Every time she saw him, she was overwhelmed with attraction. Every touch, every act of sex brought her to the pinnacle of pleasure. Every session with Mark was an adventure. When he offered her a threesome, she hesitated, but she couldn't refuse him. She walked away from her now lovers, completely satisfied and exhausted. She had never imagined such a marvelous and complete, sex. No other word fit to describe it. Jim paled in comparison. Sex at home became more infrequent and annoyingly routine. Then came February. The weather turned colder, the sky darkened, and snow continued to fall. Jim's schedule became erratic, and schools closed suddenly and unexpectedly. Not knowing when Jim or the kids would be home made it impossible to meet with Mark. By the end of the month, Linda was crawling up the walls from the influx of desires. She tried to relieve the tension with Jim's help by pouncing on him in bed one night. She had even had sex with Jim, but as soon as he tensed up, she pulled him to her and made tender love to him. She wriggled out, trying to get him to push her away like Mark and his teammates did, but Jim caressed her and tried to calm her down, telling her not to tense up, that they had all the time in the world. Eventually, she just leaned back. After that, more often than not, she pretended to be asleep when Jim went to bed, or just turned him down. She would tell him that because of the crowded conditions with the kids and the weather, she was depressed and not in the mood. Jim would lovingly agree, sigh, and turn away to go to sleep. When Dee called and suggested they celebrate the end of that awful month, Linda felt guilty about her attitude toward her husband and promised him a special night at the hotel. Maybe by becoming a little more slutty, she could get Jim to be a little more aggressive. He would never compare to Mark, but maybe he could at least outdo her toys. Jim was so turned on that she even enjoyed dancing with him that night, promising herself to dance only with him. But then Phil exclaimed, "Hey, isn't that Mark Lavaliere?" Dee squealed that it was. Dee had to know. She was Linda's only confidant and knew all about her affair. In fact, when Mark began to involve his teammates in his adventures, Linda began to bring Dee along on occasion. She proved to be insatiable, although Linda made it clear to her and Mark that Mark had nothing to do with her. Dee was perfectly happy. Linda thought Dee was overly enthusiastic whenever Mark demanded that the two women put on a show for the men or compete to see who was better at sex. Linda smiled at the memory of how she proved her superiority over her friend. That February evening at Morrison's, Linda tried not to look in Mark's direction. Just thinking about him, his bulging muscles, his steely hard body made her dizzy. She knew that if she looked at him, she would be lost. But when he crossed the room and asked Linda to dance, she was confused. When he pulled her into his arms, she felt his need and pressed herself gently against him. Linda didn't even notice that several songs had passed, and she still hadn't broken free from Mark's embrace. When he demanded that she leave with him, she said that Jim would try to stop them, and Linda couldn't let her husband get hurt. Mark suggested that she slip out the back door, and she readily agreed. At that moment, their need was so great that nothing mattered more. Not Jim, not their marriage, not even their children. Dee helped the runaway wife by suggesting that Linda come with her to the ladies' room, and on the way whispered how she had conspired with Mark to bring Linda there that night. Isn't that exciting? Linda had a fleeting thought that her foolish, cheating friend might have ruined her marriage with this excitement, but then Mark appeared in the doorway, and Linda threw herself into his arms. She had to restrain herself from ripping his clothes off as they raced to his car and drifted off into the night. No one's life would ever be the same. The end. Subscribe to my channel. Thank you.